Space, the Final Frontier. This is a brief address about Star Trek. For almost half a century, it has reached out and touched all cultures, ethnic and socioeconomic groups. Influencing our civilization, it has impacted the innovation of our human race, a phenomenon that has boldly gone where no television show has gone before. President Obama and I have something in common. We are both Trekkies, or Trekkers, however you want to call it. I have watched every episode innumerable times, collected books, and not only in English, but in French and Italian and Farsi, and it's an amazing thing to find out how all of these things are interpreted. And I have also been known to go to a Star Trek convention once or twice, but I don't dress up. I began with the opening line of Star Trek, the original series of Star Trek, the Next Generation from 1966 to 1969 and 1987 to 1993 respectively. Both of these beg the question, how do we get there from here? For those of you who were born before 1966, you may not get the relevance of some of this, but Star Trek touched on social issues that had never been addressed before. They were considered taboos, especially race, gender, socioeconomics, and they introduced new technologies that we were seeing and thinking about for the first time. In the end, I hope you will understand how a TV series has boldly influenced the entire world. In The Making of Star Trek by Gene Roddenberry, 1973, he describes, I'm going to use the keyboard. He describes the 23rd century as a utopian society where people get along, people work together. There's equality amongst all the diversities. The show only lasted for 69 episodes and ended in 1969. But it was followed by an animated series in the early 70s and then reintroduced itself in 1987 as Star Trek The Next Generation, Star Trek Deep Space Nine in 1993, Star Trek Voyager in 1997, and Star Trek Enterprise in 2001. It was also followed by 11 highly acclaimed movies. Some of them weren't quite as acclaimed as others, but they were all a lot of fun to watch. First, I want to jump into the social and cultural implications. In 1992, Whoopi Goldberg, in a BBC News interview, was quoted as saying that when she was a little girl, she remembers sitting in front of the television for the first time watching Star Trek and going, "Mama, Mama, come look, there's a black lady on television and she ain't playing a maid." Later on, another woman, Dr. Mae Jemison, a NASA astronaut who was the first African-American woman to go into space, talked about her experiences on the Endeavour and what inspired her to become an astronaut. And they both attributed their excitement about space and their future involvement in sciences to this woman, Nichelle Nichols, who played Lieutenant Uhura. She was the first black woman to portray a woman of power. She was an officer in Starfleet. She was a communications officer. But she was not impressed with her own role. It was small. She basically said, "Hailing frequencies open, Captain." But it was what she represented. And in 1967, at a dinner for Dr. Martin Luther King, he came up to her and congratulated her and thanked her for the role model she set. Other important issues that you might think are kind of silly today is that on Star Trek, they had the first interracial kiss on television. They also showed the first woman's belly button on television. Even Barbara Eden in I Dream of Jeannie either had high slacks or wore a veil over her stomach. I want to move on to addressing the political issues. In Star Trek: The Undiscovered Country, Ambassador Gorkon, in a conversation with Spock, is told only Nixon can go to China. What is happening here is that the Romulans are representing the Russian Empire following the Cold War. Prior to this, during Star Trek: The Original Series, the Klingons represented the Russians of the Cold War, the USSR, and the Romulans represented Red China. Later on, after the fall of communism and the fall of the Iron Curtain, the Klingons started becoming our allies, as did the Russians. It's a tenuous relationship to this day, as it was on Star Trek. The Romulans transferred their role, though, to the more sequestered culture of North Korea. Introducing another culture, though, one that you couldn't directly apply to a nation, was the Ferengi. The Ferengi represented capitalism gone wild in a patriarchal society. But it was the introduction of the Borg, the futuristic Frankensteins, part human, part cybernetic race with a hive mind. We all strive to belong, but with them, the idea was that resistance is futile. Several books have discussed this, including The Computers of Star Trek in 1999, An Introduction to Visual Culture in 1999, and Frames of Mind, a post-Jungian look at film and television and technology in 2007. Moving on, I want to talk about probably the two most famous people in the world, Mr. Spock and Captain Kirk. They are the yin and yang of each other. They are logic and passion, struggling to find peace with themselves and for each other. Their devotion could be considered almost homoerotic, but that was never a subject that could really be discussed in Star Trek with these characters. Finally, my final point is to move on to the scientific relevance Star Trek has had. There's more than I could possibly cover in this short speech, but I want to talk about some of the things that the science of Star Trek has espoused.
We'll give 10 to 20 seconds.
The physics of Star Trek with Stephen Hawking. He is quoted to say, science fiction is fun, and not only good fun, but it serves a serious purpose that expanding the human mind. Moving on very, very quickly, you can see that these things have all been relevant. But finally, I want to finish with President Obama. He is a Star Trek fan. He believes in the final frontier, and he has also been quoted as being, he has also been named as being part Vulcan due to his interracial lifestyle. And that's it.